In this video, we'll look at the three-dimensional paths on the S&P 500, Bitcoin, gold, junk bonds, Tesla, silver, and copper. We'll explain how incredibly important they are, no matter what you invest in. This is content you won't find anywhere else on YouTube. Let's run the numbers. Inside the service, at the start of each month, we do the normalized positive price path, the normalized negative price path, and the consolidation path. This is based on all of price analysis. What we can see at the current time is that gold is performing really well. It's on target to close out the month at 26.56. Copper has also really performed very well. And one thing to understand, these price paths are drawn when the indicator is created. They're all based on structural analysis over all of price history. They're not changed throughout the month. They're drawn at the start of the month and they remain in play until the next month. Dr. Copper is so far just consolidating and is set to close out on the normalized positive price path at 434.20. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that if a chart breaks out to a new all-time high, as happened with the S&P 500, there is simply no resistance above it. This is unfortunately untrue. We'll have a little bit of a deeper look at the structural levels just as we zoom in, but at the current time, the S&P is on its normalized positive price path for an expected closeout of 57.61. There's a very specific reason that we track the major indices as well as gold and also the Forex pairs. What you see here is the S&P 500. This is on a 30-minute basis, so it gives us a bit of a view as to what is happening right now. The other charts were on a daily basis. You can see the S&P 500 futures have rolled over, but also the S&P 500 futures were coming up, just tailed out and came down. What did we see with the NASDAQ? We saw a very similar thing. What about the Dow futures? Exactly the same kind of thing. What about the Russell 2000? The same. What is that blue line under there? That is Bitcoin's price. Now, what does this actually mean? As the futures go up, or as the S&P 500 goes up, there's more investor attractiveness there. And as it comes down, more and more people are selling. As the major indices go up, that creates a risk-on behavior. And of course, that flows through to the riskiest asset class of them all, which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the apex predator of asset classes. Which simply means if you want to get paid really well, if you know what you're doing, put your money in Bitcoin and crypto. But the caveat is you must know what you're doing. Another stock that moves like Bitcoin does is Tesla. You can see it's just following that normalized positive price path. We would expect to close out for the end of the month at 261.96. Looking at another normalized positive price path, we can see Microsoft is currently consolidating, and we expect to close out at the end of the month at 437.84. All of these paths, called CTKS paths, are formed with an understanding of structure, which requires Level 1 and Level 2 standard certification. These are not just random lines drawn just haphazardly on a screen. And if structure holds for Microsoft, we expect it to consolidate basically to the end of the month. Yields are definitely in the spotlight, and we can see the US 2-year yield just following that normalized negative price path. We would expect it to close out at 3.643%. When people first start trading and investing, they think all the charts are not connected to each other. After all, if you're putting money into Microsoft or Bitcoin or Solana or ADA or a meme coin like Pepe or something like that, Doge, SHIB, you wouldn't expect it to be connected to junk bonds, but it actually is. Junk bonds gives a very good indication of risk on, or risk off activity. And currently we can see junk bonds has the potential to consolidate and close out at around that 98.03 mark. Remember, these price paths are drawn at the start of the month and never changed. Each month there are new price paths that are drawn. We've seen outperformance in both gold and silver, and we can see that silver is currently following the normalized positive price path. If it comes back to that normalized level, we would expect a closeout at around the $30 mark. Just one thing to be aware of, normalized means normalized. It means the price can go up and down, but we expect it to close at that closeout price. But that is under normalized price conditions. Generally, the service has a very good track record of tracking those normalized end prices for the month. Where the indices go is very, very important to commodities, crypto, and Forex. It does take a while to understand the intercorrelations and interconnections between charts. The financial markets are like any field of endeavor. You have to learn to speak the language of the markets. And the language of the markets is undoubtedly the charts that represent the actual price action. Here we can see the S&P 500. When we turn on the indicator, it'll show us the structural levels, support and resistance based over more than 55,800 days worth. That's the indicator here, but I just won't pop it on at the moment. I want to show you something incredibly important. You can see this blue line here. That is Bitcoin. What was happening as the S&P 500 was coming down? Bitcoin was coming down, and then the S&P 500 did a big jump because junk bonds did a big jump. And now, as you know, junk bonds is experiencing a level of resistance, structural resistance, which is flattening it out. What is happening to the S&P 500 and what is happening to Bitcoin at this current time? They are getting flattened out as well. I've just popped on the indicator for you. At the start of the month, this was the previous all-time high of the S&P 500. A lot of people think that you get into positive air, which basically means that there's nothing above. That is price discovery. Above a new all-time high is supposed to be price discovery. So what the heck are these resistance levels doing here? And what is this pesky structural resistance level doing? It's stopping the upward ascent of price. It's directly at this 57.20 mark that we're having so much problems with the S&P 500. But if you didn't know how to draw structure, you simply wouldn't know that this existed. Therefore, hopefully, when you look at Bitcoin and you know Bitcoin controls the fate of the entire crypto market, what you can see is through Bitcoin into the S&P 500 chart, and you know that junk bonds is a very large determinant of where the S&P 500 will go. And on the inverse of that is the VIX. So when you look at things like this, it becomes much more readily understood. We're getting into structural overhead resistance on the major indices, and that is causing those indices to bounce back because resistance equals sellers. If you find this content helpful and you have a friend or family member who you think could get an advantage from understanding how these markets work, and you know this is true right across stocks, commodities, crypto, and Forex, please make sure that you share with them. Hopefully now, when you look at Bitcoin's price, you're not just looking at Bitcoin, you're looking at the major indices, you're looking at junk bonds, you're inverting the VIX to give you more and more signals. But don't forget, without a knowledge of structural levels, they're just charts overlaying each other. And what typically happens is this. When Bitcoin gets into an area of structural resistance, or the S&P 500, the Dow, the Russell, the Nasdaq, if they come up to structural resistance levels, expect Bitcoin to actually pull back. But that's not going to stop at Bitcoin, is it? Because we know no alt can escape Bitcoin's gravity. It's going to hit Ethereum. It's going to hit Binance Coin. Solana will be hit as well. XRP, Dogecoin, all the memes. ADA, Cardano, and the entire crypto market will suffer as Bitcoin comes down. We can see at the current time, Bitcoin is just a little bit weaker than the normalized positive price path. We always expect turbulence, up and down type momentum. Just to get a pullback is not anything significant. Just look at this pullback. We got that pullback and then a rally. Our issue is always the same. We love to buy on red because we know where the structure is, and I'll pop this indicator on in a minute to inform you where the structural support levels are. Without a knowledge of CTKS structure, it is impossible to draw these particular three-dimensional curves. That is, it would be impossible to predict that Bitcoin could close out the end of the month at 66,456. Let's zoom in and have a look at this structure. A lot of people always are very confused why price does what it does, but a lot of the time, perhaps 95% of the time, it's all on the intercorrelation between charts and intercorrelation between structural levels. For example, what caused this big dump earlier on today? That was the Aussie market selling down to areas of structural support. And then we saw the VIX collapsing. So the inverted VIX started coming up. As it wobbled around, it came up. And we saw bidding on the Japanese and UK markets. And then as the stock futures started to come down, what happened? Bitcoin followed. Bitcoin has become mainstream. A lot of people will say that Bitcoin is an uncorrelated asset. It is definitely going to replace gold. That is not a question, not a shadow of a doubt. But at the moment, it is obeying market structure right across the markets. We don't listen to stories, we just see what the actual charts are telling us. Charts told us that as the VIX broke down, the VIX futures broke down. We had a rally, but we were stopped out at 64,600. We couldn't flip the 64,400 level of structural once resistance into support. You see that we just decayed through it. Because there was a negative air gap here or a negative fair value gap, we dropped precipitously. And you can see it was a positive air gap and we increased very, very quickly. Now, why did we slow down? Because we had a lot of structural support below us. Now, what is this particular price action telling us? It's telling us that around the 63,300 level is incredibly important. If we do not hold that, we're coming down to 62,890. And you can learn how to draw the most statistically significant support and resistance levels known to mankind through level 1 and level 2 standard certification. And what happens if we come back and retest this area? Well, we would need to get above 63,800. So we would need to flip these levels and just bypass the 64,000. Everything is structurally related inside markets. To be profitable inside financial markets, you need a lot of rules. Just always remember that your chart is moved by other charts. What are these other charts? The most important charts that you can be looking at are these charts here. They're the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 charts. In this video, we examine the three-dimensional risk management, or those up and down paths, price targets for the end of the month, for the S&P 500, for Bitcoin, for gold, junk bonds, copper, silver, and Tesla. But of course, those projections inside the service available at ctksmethod.org exist for every single one of these charts, including the 5 down here. They will help you enormously to target where things could and are likely to go during the month. It's really important to keep positive. The CTKS Creed is all about daily positive affirmations for abundance, financial success, and happiness. Please know that the universe wants you to succeed. Therefore, every day you can be happy. Every day you can show kindness, integrity, and gratitude. Starting small and going slow to go fast is the key with everything. Just start small and scale. Make sure you get it right before you leverage up and blow up your account. And always remember, every single life pullback, for one step backwards, you will go 2 steps forwards. That's why it's vitally important to be dedicated and committed. You either win or learn, and if you don't blame, you'll just learn what that lesson was, and you will not get a more expensive lesson the next time. Secret word for this video is targets. So if you've made it this far, please just pop a comment together talking about something about targets. Targets are really important to decide on right at the start of the month. Have a great day or night ahead, my friends, and Kate and I look forward to catching up with you again in the next video. Bye for now.